The sun had barely risen as Ethan and I meandered through the lively flea market, our footsteps echoing on the cobblestone paths. The air buzzed with chatter and laughter, the vendors' voices blending into a vibrant symphony. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of antique wood and old books. "Mom, this place is amazing," Ethan exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. At 12 years old, his curiosity was boundless, and he had a knack for finding the extraordinary in the mundane. "It sure is," I replied, smiling at his enthusiasm. "Let's see what treasures we can find today." We strolled past stalls brimming with vintage trinkets, faded photographs, and forgotten relics. Each item seemed to whisper a story, waiting to be discovered. Ethan darted from one stall to the next, his youthful energy infectious. As we turned a corner, a particular booth caught our attention. Nestled among a pile of miscellaneous items was an old weathered chest. Its dark wood was marred with age, and intricate carvings adorned its edges, hinting at a rich history. "Look at this, Mom," Ethan called out, pointing to the chest. His excitement was palpable. We approached the booth, where a kindly old man with a twinkle in his eye greeted us. His name tag read Mr. Thompson. "Found something special, have you?" he asked with a knowing smile. Ethan nodded vigorously. "This chest looks really old. What's its story?" Mr. Thompson chuckled softly. This chest has been with me for many years. It once belonged to a young woman in the early 1900s. Her name was Margaret. She used it to store her most treasured possessions." Intrigued, I glanced at Ethan, who was practically bouncing on his toes. "How much are you asking for it?" I inquired. Mr. Thompson rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Well, it's a piece of history, but I'm willing to let it go for $50. Something tells me it might just find a new story with you two." Ethan's eyes lit up, and I couldn't resist his excitement. "We'll take it," I said, handing over the money. As we carefully transported the chest to our car, Ethan couldn't stop talking about what we might find inside. "Do you think there are old letters or maybe even a hidden treasure?" he speculated, his imagination running wild. "We'll have to wait and see," I replied, feeling a thrill of anticipation myself. Back home, we placed the chest in the living room, surrounded by the comforting clutter of our everyday lives. Ethan and I exchanged eager glances as we knelt before it, ready to unveil its secrets. "Ready, Mom?" Ethan asked, his hands hovering over the lid. "Ready," I confirmed, my heart pounding with excitement. With a gentle creak, the lid lifted, revealing an array of old documents, letters, and a small, worn diary. The scent of aged paper filled the air, transporting us to another time. "Look at this," Ethan whispered, carefully picking up the diary. The cover was faded, but the date, 1910, was still visible. "It's a diary." I took the diary from Ethan, my fingers trembling with anticipation. As I opened it, the elegant handwriting of Margaret greeted us, her words reaching out across the decades. "October 3, 1910, I read aloud. Today, I met Edward in the garden. Our love grows stronger with each passing day." Ethan listened intently, his eyes wide with wonder. "Who do you think Edward was, Mom?" "I'm not sure, but it sounds like they had a special connection," I replied, flipping through the pages. "Let's read more and find out." As the afternoon turned to evening, Ethan and I immersed ourselves in Margaret's world, her diary entries painting a vivid picture of love and perseverance. Each page brought us closer to her, bridging the gap between our lives and hers. The chest, once a forgotten relic, had become a portal to the past, revealing a story that would soon intertwine with our own. Ethan and I shared a look of mutual understanding, knowing that our adventure had only just begun. "Mom, this is amazing," Ethan said softly. "I feel like we're part of something really special." I nodded, my heart swelling with a sense of wonder. "Me too, Ethan. Me too." Little did we know, Margaret's tale was just the beginning of a journey that would change our lives forever, teaching us about love, resilience, and the enduring power of hope. Ethan and I spent the next few days eagerly exploring the contents of the chest. Each item we uncovered seemed to draw us deeper into Margaret's world. The diary, with its delicate pages and elegant handwriting, quickly became our most treasured discovery. "Mom, can we read more of Margaret's diary tonight?" Ethan asked one evening as we settled into the living room. The chest now had a permanent spot beside the couch, a constant reminder of our newfound adventure. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, reaching for the diary. "Let's see what Margaret has to tell us today." We nestled together on the couch, the warm glow of the lamp casting a cozy light over us. I opened the diary to where we had left off, my fingers grazing the fragile pages. "October 4, 1910, I began, my voice steady. Edward and I met by the old oak tree today. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the fields. He took my hand, and in that moment, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world." Ethan listened intently, his eyes wide with fascination. "Do you think Edward was her boyfriend?" "Possibly," I mused, flipping to the next entry. "Let's read on and find out more." As we delved deeper into the diary, Margaret's life began to unfold before us. Her entries were filled with vivid descriptions of her daily activities, her hopes, and her dreams. Through her words, we could sense her deep affection for Edward and the challenges they faced. "October 10, 1910, I continued. Edward has been called away on business. The days feel longer without him here. I miss his laughter, his comforting presence, but I know we must be strong, for our love will see us through." Ethan sighed, resting his head on my shoulder. "Margaret really loved Edward, didn't she?" "It certainly seems so," I replied, smiling at his empathy. Their love was something special. As we read on, the diary revealed more about Margaret's world. She spoke of her family, her friends, and the small joys that brightened her days. Each entry was a window into her soul, offering glimpses of her resilience and determination. "October 15, 1910, I read aloud. Today, I received a letter from Edward. He writes of his longing to return home, to be by my side once more. His words bring me comfort, reminding me that distance cannot diminish our love." Ethan looked up at me, his eyes filled with curiosity. "Do you think Edward ever came back?" "I'm sure he did," I said, my heart aching for Margaret's longing. "Let's keep reading and see how their story unfolds." As we turned the pages, we discovered more about Margaret and Edward's relationship. They faced numerous obstacles, from societal expectations to personal struggles, yet their love remained unwavering. "November 1, 1910, I read. Edward returned home today. The sight of him standing at my doorstep, his arms open wide, filled me with indescribable joy. We spent the evening by the fire, sharing stories and dreams. In his embrace, I found solace, a reminder that love can conquer all." Ethan's face lit up with a smile. "I'm glad Edward came back. They deserve to be happy." "Yes, they do," I agreed, my voice tinged with emotion. "Their love is truly inspiring." As the evening wore on, we continued to read Margaret's diary, her words becoming a cherished part of our lives. Each entry brought us closer to her story intertwining with our own in ways we couldn't have imagined. "Mom, I feel like I know Margaret," Ethan said softly, "like she's a friend." "I feel the same way, Ethan," I replied, closing the diary gently. "Her story is a gift, one that we're lucky to have found." That night, as we turned off the lights and prepared for bed, I couldn't help but reflect on the connection we had formed with Margaret. Her diary was more than just a record of her past. It was a testament to the power of love and the strength of the human spirit. Ethan's voice broke the silence. "Mom, do you think we'll find out what happened to Margaret and Edward in the end?" "I believe we will," I said, reassuringly. "And whatever we discover, I know it will be a journey worth taking." As I tucked Ethan into bed and kissed him goodnight, I felt a sense of anticipation for the days ahead. The chest, with its hidden treasures, had opened a door to a story that was as much about us as it was about Margaret and Edward. Our adventure had only just begun, and I knew that together we would uncover every piece of the puzzle, one page at a time. The chest had already given us so much to explore: the diary, old letters, and personal documents. But the most intriguing finds were yet to come. Hidden at the bottom of the chest, beneath layers of faded paper and dust, lay a small ornate key and a weathered piece of parchment, a property deed. "Look at this, Ethan," I said, holding up the key. Its brass surface gleamed under the light, and intricate designs adorned its handle. "This looks like it could unlock something important." Ethan's eyes widened with excitement. "Do you think it opens a hidden compartment or a secret drawer?" "Maybe," I said, my curiosity piqued. "Let's see what else is in that parchment." Carefully, I unfolded the document. It was a deed to a property, dated 1910, and the elegant script revealed an address. The location seemed to match an old estate on the outskirts of town. "Mom, do you think this is where Margaret and Edward lived?" Ethan asked, leaning over the table. "It could be," I replied, scanning the document. "The address matches the location of an old estate I've heard about. Maybe this is where they spent their time together." Excitement buzzed between us as we studied the deed. It mentioned a large house with gardens and stables, describing a picturesque property that seemed straight out of Margaret's diary entries. "We should visit the address and see if there's anything left," Ethan suggested, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "That's a great idea," I agreed, tucking the deed and key into a safe place. "Let's plan a visit for this weekend." Saturday arrived, and Ethan and I set out for the estate. The drive was filled with anticipation, and the lush landscape soon gave way to a large, weathered house partially obscured by overgrown vines and trees. It looked like something from a bygone era, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. As we approached the front door, Ethan's excitement was palpable. "Do you think we'll find anything interesting?" "Let's hope so," I replied, holding up the key. This might be the key to unlocking more of Margaret's story. We found the front door slightly ajar, and with a cautious push, we stepped inside. The interior was dusty and filled with cobwebs, but the grandeur of the place was still evident. High ceilings, ornate moldings, and old furniture painted a picture of a once beautiful home. "Look at this place," Ethan said, peering into a large, dusty room. "It's like stepping back in time." I nodded, scanning the room for anything that might be connected to Margaret and Edward. My eyes fell on an old cabinet in the corner, its intricate carvings matching the designs on the key. "Let's try the key in that cabinet," I suggested, motioning toward it. Ethan and I approached the cabinet with bated breath. I carefully inserted the key into the lock, my hands trembling with excitement. With a satisfying click, the cabinet door creaked open. Inside, we found more documents, some old photographs, and a small leather-bound book. Ethan picked up the book with reverence and brushed off the dust. "Mom, look at this," he said, holding it up. The cover was embossed with the title, Margaret's Dreams. I took the book from him, feeling the surge of excitement. This must be another piece of Margaret's story. We sat down on an old sofa, the book between us. As I opened it, I noticed it was a collection of Margaret's personal reflections and dreams. Her writing was filled with hope and longing, and it provided a deeper understanding of her aspirations and desires. December 1, 1910, I read aloud. "Edward and I have been discussing our dreams for the future. We envision a life together, away from the constraints of society. We want a home where we can be free to follow our hearts." Ethan leaned in closer. This sounds like it was really important to her. It was, I agreed, turning the pages. Margaret's dreams were filled with love and a desire for a life where she and Edward could truly be themselves. As we continued to read, we discovered more about Margaret and Edward's plans and hopes for their future. The book revealed their vision of a life built on mutual respect and shared dreams. "Mom, I feel like we're uncovering something really special here," Ethan said, his voice filled with awe. I do too, I replied, closing the book gently. Margaret's story is becoming more vivid with each discovery. We spent the rest of the day exploring the estate, uncovering more clues about Margaret and Edward's life. The house, though in disrepair, was filled with echoes of their past. The journey we were on was more than just a search for historical artifacts. It was a deep dive into the lives and loves of people who had lived so long ago. As we left the estate, I felt a renewed sense of connection to Margaret and Edward. Their story was no longer just a mystery. It was a tangible part of our lives. And I knew that our adventure was far from over. Mom, do you think we'll find out what happened to them next? Ethan asked as we drove away. I believe we will, I said with a smile. There's still so much to discover. And with that, we set our sights on the next chapter of our journey, ready to uncover even more about Margaret and Edward's lives and the impact their story would have on ours. The old estate stood majestically despite its state of disrepair. Its once grand facade, now weathered and worn, was partially obscured by ivy and creeping vines. As Ethan and I walked up the cracked pathway, I couldn't help but feel a sense of reverence for the place that had been a part of Margaret and Edward's lives. Mom, this place is incredible, Ethan said, his voice echoing with awe. I can't believe they lived here. I know, I replied, my eyes scanning the estate. It's like stepping into a different era. We approached the front door, which was slightly ajar, and pushed it open. The hinges creaked, and we were greeted by the musty smell of old wood and dust. The interior was a labyrinth of rooms and hallways, each one hinting at a once beautiful home now lost to time. This place must have been amazing when it was new, Ethan remarked, running his fingers along the ornate moldings. I nodded, admiring the high ceilings and intricate details. It's easy to see why Margaret and Edward would have cherished this place. We ventured further into the house, our footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust covering the floors. As we explored, we came across a large library with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with old books. The room had a cozy feel, with a large fireplace and comfortable-looking armchairs. Look at this, Mom, Ethan said, picking up an old photograph from a side table. This must be Margaret and Edward. The photograph was a black and white portrait of a young couple, their faces filled with love and happiness. Margaret, with her soft features and warm smile, looked radiant, while Edward stood proudly beside her. I could almost feel the warmth of their affection through the image. It's them, I said softly, my heart swelling with emotion. They look so happy. We continued our exploration, discovering various rooms, each one revealing more about the lives lived here. In the dining room, we found an old ledger, and in the study, an assortment of letters tied with a ribbon. Each discovery felt like a piece of the puzzle falling into place. This house has so many stories to tell, Ethan said, holding up a letter he had found. I wish we could hear them all. I smiled, my mind racing with the possibilities. We're getting closer to understanding Margaret and Edward's story. Every clue we find helps us learn more about their lives. We finally made our way to the basement, which was filled with dusty crates and old furniture. Amidst the clutter, we found a small room that appeared to be a personal space, perhaps Margaret's private study. It was filled with handwritten notes, sketches, and more personal items. Look at this, I said, pulling out a leather-bound journal from a drawer. This might be another of Margaret's personal journals. Ethan's eyes lit up with curiosity. Let's see what's inside. We opened the journal carefully, and the pages revealed more of Margaret's thoughts and dreams. Her writing was poetic and heartfelt, filled with reflections on her life and her love for Edward. January 15, 1911, I read aloud. Edward and I have been working on our plans for the future. We dream of building a life together here, a place where we can create our own paradise away from the world's troubles. It is our sanctuary, a place where love and peace can flourish. Wow, Ethan said, his voice filled with awe. Margaret really saw this place as a haven. It's clear how much this estate meant to her, I replied, closing the journal gently. It was more than just a home. It was a symbol of her dreams and her love for Edward. As we made our way out of the basement, we stumbled upon a small box tucked away in a corner. Inside, we found a collection of old coins, jewelry, and more personal mementos. Each item felt like a connection to Margaret and Edward's past, a tangible link to their lives. "This place is incredible," Ethan said, his voice filled with wonder. "I can't believe we're uncovering all this history." "I feel the same way," I said, my heart full of gratitude. "It's like we're getting to know them in a way that few people ever could." We spent the rest of the day exploring the estate, taking photographs and documenting our findings. The house, though faded and forgotten, held a wealth of memories and stories that had been waiting for us to discover. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the estate, Ethan and I stood on the front porch, taking in the view. "Mom, what do you think will happen next?" Ethan asked, looking out at the horizon. "I'm not sure," I replied, "but I have a feeling that Margaret and Edward's story has more to reveal. We're just beginning to uncover the layers of their lives." Ethan nodded, a determined look in his eyes. "I can't wait to find out." With a sense of fulfillment and anticipation, we left the old estate, knowing that our journey was far from over. The next chapter of Margaret and Edward's story awaited us, and I was eager to see where it would lead. The following weeks were filled with a whirlwind of activity as Ethan and I delved deeper into the discoveries we had made at the estate. The old journal, letters, and photographs provided a rich tapestry of Margaret and Edward's life, and we were eager to piece together their story. Our investigation led us to the local library and historical society, where we hoped to find more information about the couple and their past. One sunny afternoon, Ethan and I walked into the library, our arms loaded with the artifacts we had found. The library, with its high ceilings and rows of old books, seemed like the perfect place to continue our journey. "Mom, I think the librarians here will be able to help us," Ethan said, glancing around at the vast collection. "I hope so," I replied, setting down a stack of documents on a nearby table. "There's so much we need to learn." We approached the front desk, where a kind-faced librarian, Mrs. Dawson, greeted us. Her warm smile and keen interest in our project were evident as we explained what we had discovered. "That sounds like a fascinating project," Mrs. Dawson said, adjusting her glasses. "I'd be happy to help you with any research." Ethan and I exchanged excited looks. "We're looking for any historical records or information about Margaret and Edward, particularly regarding the estate and their lives," I explained. Mrs. Dawson nodded thoughtfully. "I'll start by checking our archives for any mentions of the estate or the couple. We might also have some old newspapers or local records that could shed light on their story." As Mrs. Dawson began her search, Ethan and I spread out our documents on a nearby table. We pored over the letters and journal entries, noting any significant details about Margaret and Edward's lives. "Look at this," Ethan said, holding up a letter. "Margaret talks about how much she loved the garden at the estate." I took the letter from him and read aloud. "The garden has become a sanctuary for us, a place where we can escape from the world's troubles and find solace in each other's company." It's clear how much she cherished that place, Ethan said, his eyes reflecting the sentiment of the letter. It's like the estate was more than just a home to them. It was a part of their happiness. Mrs. Dawson soon returned with a stack of old newspapers and a thick file labeled Local History. She laid them out on the table, her face glowing with enthusiasm. "I found a few articles and documents that might be relevant. There's a lot of information here about the estate and its previous owners." We eagerly dug into the files, discovering articles about the estate's history, including mentions of Margaret and Edward. One article detailed a community event they had hosted, highlighting their generosity and the positive impact they had on the town. "This is amazing," I said, reading aloud from an article. "Margaret and Edward Thompson are known for their philanthropic efforts and their commitment to improving the community. Their estate has become a symbol of their dedication and love." Ethan looked up from the documents, his face illuminated with excitement. "This is incredible. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle of their lives. We continued our research, uncovering more about Margaret and Edward's contributions to the community and their personal struggles. The deeper we delved, the more connected we felt to their story. As the library began to close, Mrs. Dawson approached us with a gentle smile. "It looks like you've made significant progress. If you need any more help or access to additional archives, please feel free to come back." "Thank you so much, Mrs. Dawson," I said, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Your assistance has been invaluable." Ethan and I left the library with a renewed sense of purpose. The connection we felt to Margaret and Edward grew stronger with each piece of information we uncovered. Their story was no longer just a series of old documents. It was a living narrative that resonated with our own experiences and emotions. As we walked to our car, Ethan turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, do you think Margaret and Edward's story is meant to teach us something?" "I believe so," I replied, my voice filled with conviction. Their story of love and perseverance is a reminder of the power of following your heart and staying true to your values, no matter the challenges. Ethan nodded, his eyes shining with understanding. "I feel like their story is helping us find something important in our own lives." I hugged him tightly, feeling a profound connection to both my son and the historical couple we had come to know so well. "I think you're right. Their journey has brought us closer together and given us a deeper appreciation for the love and resilience in our own lives." As we drove home, I glanced at the stack of documents and artifacts on the back seat, feeling a sense of fulfillment. Margaret and Edward's story was far from over, and I was excited to continue exploring their lives and discovering the lessons they had to offer. After weeks of uncovering bits and pieces of Margaret and Edward's story, Ethan and I were eager to dive deeper into their past. We decided to visit the local historical society, hoping to find more comprehensive records about the couple and the estate. The Historical Society was a charming old building, nestled between a row of quaint shops. Its brick facade and vintage signage hinted at the wealth of history contained within its walls. As we entered the building, the air was filled with the musty scent of old books and documents. A volunteer, Mr. Jenkins, greeted us with a friendly smile. His silver hair and bow tie gave him a scholarly appearance, and he seemed to exude a deep love for local history. "Welcome to the Historical Society," Mr. Jenkins said warmly. "How can I assist you today?" "Hello," I replied. "My son and I have been researching a couple named Margaret and Edward Thompson. We'd found some intriguing documents about them and their estate. We're hoping you can help us find more detailed information." Mr. Jenkins's eyes lit up with interest. "Ah, the Thompsons. They were quite prominent in our town's history. We might have several records on them. Please follow me." He led us to a back room filled with filing cabinets, old ledgers, and various archival materials. Ethan and I eagerly followed, our curiosity growing with each step. "We've been researching the history of the estate they owned," Ethan explained as we reached the room. "We found a deed and some old letters, and we're hoping to learn more about their impact on the community." Mr. Jenkins nodded, pulling out a large ledger. "Let's start with this. It's a record of property transactions and historical notes. I'll also check our collection of old newspapers and personal letters." As Mr. Jenkins began searching through the files, Ethan and I started examining some of the old ledgers. The room was quiet except for the rustling of pages and the occasional murmur of conversation from the nearby research area. "This ledger has a lot of information about property sales," I said, flipping through the pages. "Here's a listing for the Thompson estate. It looks like they made several improvements to the property." Ethan looked up from a stack of old photographs. "Mom, check this out. I found a photo of the estate with Margaret and Edward in the garden. They look so happy." I joined him, studying the photograph closely. They really did create a beautiful sanctuary for themselves. It's amazing to see them so vibrant and alive in this picture. Mr. Jenkins returned with a file folder filled with newspaper clippings and personal correspondence. I found some articles and letters that might be of interest. There's an article from the local paper about a charity event the Thompsons hosted. It seems they were deeply involved in community service. I glanced at the article, which detailed a grand charity ball organized by Margaret and Edward. The event had raised funds for local causes and had been widely celebrated in the community. "This is incredible," I said, showing the article to Ethan. Margaret and Edward's contributions to the community were significant. They truly made a difference. Ethan nodded, clearly moved by the information. It's amazing to see how much they cared about others. Their story is really inspiring. Mr. Jenkins then presented a collection of personal letters. These are letters written by Margaret and Edward to various friends and family members. They provide a more personal glimpse into their lives and their challenges. As we read through the letters, one particular correspondence caught our attention. It was a heartfelt letter from Margaret to a close friend, describing her struggles with illness and her deep love for Edward. "This letter is so touching," I said, my voice tinged with emotion. Margaret's words reveal how much she cherished her relationship with Edward, even in difficult times. Ethan looked up, his expression thoughtful. "It's like we're getting to know them on a very personal level. Their love story is so profound." Mr. Jenkins smiled at our enthusiasm. "It's wonderful to see your connection to their story. Many people only scratch the surface of history, but you're truly uncovering the essence of their lives." As the afternoon turned into evening, Ethan and I reluctantly prepared to leave. We thanked Mr. Jenkins for his help, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. "Thank you so much for your assistance," I said, shaking Mr. Jenkins's hand. "We've learned so much today." "It was my pleasure," Mr. Jenkins replied with a smile. "If you need any more help or come across any other leads, don't hesitate to reach out. It's always gratifying to see people passionate about local history." Ethan and I walked back to the car, carrying the new materials we had uncovered. The Historical Society had provided us with valuable insights and a deeper understanding of Margaret and Edward's lives. As we drove home, Ethan turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, do you think their story has more lessons for us to learn?" "I believe so," I replied, reflecting on our discoveries. Margaret and Edward's lives remind us of the importance of love, resilience, and making a positive impact on others. Their story is a testament to the enduring power of compassion and commitment. Ethan smiled, clearly inspired by our journey. "I'm glad we found their story. It's helping us understand more about ourselves and what really matters." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of connection to both my son and the historical couple we had come to know so well. Our journey was far from over, and I was excited to continue exploring the rich tapestry of Margaret and Edward's lives, knowing that their story had touched us in ways we could have never imagined. With the wealth of information we had gathered from the Historical Society and our ongoing research into Margaret and Edward's lives, Ethan and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their story had not only provided us with historical insight, but had also deepened our understanding of our own lives. The connection we felt with Margaret and Edward's journey was profound, and it was clear that their experiences were enriching our own in unexpected ways. One sunny Saturday morning, Ethan and I decided to revisit the estate, which had now become a symbol of our quest. We arrived with a sense of reverence, armed with our new discoveries and a fresh determination to continue exploring. As we walked through the overgrown garden, I noticed how much the estate had fallen into disrepair since Margaret and Edward's time, but the beauty and charm of the place were still evident. "This place is so full of history," Ethan said, brushing a hand over the cracked stone wall. "I can almost feel Margaret and Edward's presence here." "I feel the same way," I replied, looking around at the estate. "It's as if their spirit still lingers, reminding us of their story and what it represents." We made our way to the old study, which we had previously found to be a treasure trove of letters and documents. As we entered, we spread out the new materials we had gathered from the Historical Society and began to piece together more about Margaret and Edward's life. "Look at this," Ethan said, holding up an old ledger we had found. It's a record of donations Margaret and Edward made to various local charities. I glanced over at the ledger, admiring their generosity. It's clear they were deeply committed to helping others. Their contributions had a significant impact on the community. Ethan nodded, his eyes reflecting a mix of admiration and contemplation. It makes me think about how we can contribute more to our community. Their legacy is a reminder of the difference one can make. Inspired by our discoveries, we decided to organize a small charity event in honor of Margaret and Edward. We reached out to local businesses and community members, sharing their story and inviting them to participate. The event was designed to reflect the spirit of Margaret and Edward's generosity and commitment to community service. As the event drew near, Ethan and I worked tirelessly to prepare. We arranged for a local band to perform, set up tables for food and refreshments, and created displays showcasing Margaret and Edward's story. The community's response was overwhelmingly positive, and we were touched by the enthusiasm and support we received. On the day of the event, the estate was transformed into a lively gathering space. People from all walks of life came together to celebrate and contribute to the cause. Ethan and I stood together, watching the scene unfold with a sense of fulfillment and pride. "Look at all these people," Ethan said, his voice filled with emotion. "It's amazing to see how Margaret and Edward's story has inspired so many." "It really is," I agreed, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Their legacy is living on through this event and the impact it's having on our community. As the event concluded, we took a moment to reflect on the day's success. The charity had raised significant funds for local causes, and the atmosphere was filled with warmth and camaraderie. "This has been incredible," Ethan said, taking a deep breath. "I feel like we've truly honored Margaret and Edward's memory." "I do too," I replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Their story has not only enriched our lives, but has also brought people together in a meaningful way." We packed up the remaining items and prepared to head home, both of us feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. Our journey had brought us closer, and the experience had left us with valuable lessons about love, resilience, and the power of giving back. As we drove away from the estate, Ethan turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we'll keep exploring other stories like this?" "I'd like that," I said with a smile. "There's so much history out there, and each story has the potential to teach us something valuable." Ethan nodded, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "Me too. It's amazing how much we can learn from the past and how it can inspire us in the present." Our adventure with Margaret and Edward had come to a satisfying conclusion, but the lessons we had learned and the connections we had made would continue to influence us. Their story had shown us the importance of empathy, perseverance, and making a positive impact on the world around us. As we drove home, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper appreciation for the richness of history and the power of storytelling. Our lives had been enriched by the journey, and I knew that Margaret and Edward's legacy would continue to inspire us for years to come.